Okay, let's unpack one of the biggest, most persistent mysteries in tech, really. Who is Satoshi Nakamoto? The person or maybe group who created Bitcoin. But what if I told you there's this fairly recent investigation, a really interesting one, that suggests we might finally have a solid lead, a really specific lead. So today we're going to do a deep dive into that. We're exploring this unique technical approach that tries to unmask Satoshi, not through like old forum posts or just guessing. No, this uses digital forensics. We'll lay out the surprising evidence, then really weigh the counter arguments and try to figure out what does this all really mean for Bitcoin and its future.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating here, I think, is that this isn't just another theory based on like writing style or location. This investigation, it actually tries to use the digital DNA of the very first Bitcoin software itself to narrow things down. It moves beyond just opinion into something more like cryptographic detective work. It's pretty cool.
Absolutely. So this specific investigation comes from a security expert, Nima Bagheri. He published his findings just this year, 2024. And Nima's background is really key here. He knows a lot about how software gets built, how it's compiled. So he wasn't looking for Satoshi's writing style or, who they might know. That's what most people focus on, right? Instead, he zeroed in on the very first compiled version of the Bitcoin client, version 0.1. He was looking for these digital signals left behind by the actual computer and the specific software used to create it.
Right. Think of it like this, okay? When you compile a program, basically turn the human-readable code into something the computer understands, it leaves behind certain characteristics, like imagine a chef's style or the specific pots and pans they use. They leave tiny marks on the food, yeah? And those marks can vary slightly depending on the kitchen setup. Nima's approach, it cleverly uses these subtle variations. It's looking at how the software was built, not just what it does. It's a really neat angle.
But finding that digital fingerprint, well, that was just the start. The first big hurdle Nama hit was actually finding Satoshi's original compiled Bitcoin client. It wasn't just sitting around on public websites or, old email lists. It was hard to track down. So he had this really clever idea. He decided to check VirusTotal. That's a public database where people upload files to scan them for viruses, right? The hope was maybe someone, like an early Bitcoin adopter, uploaded Satoshi's original client there years ago, and it just sat there.
It's actually a pretty smart move for finding really old, rare digital files. Of course, you're relying on a third-party database, VirusTotal in this case, so you have to trust their records to some extent. But for these kinds of historical digital artifacts, it's a unique source of information.
And boom, he found it. Nima located a file in VirusTotal's database that, after his really careful analysis, matched the exact compilation characteristics of Satoshi's original Bitcoin client. That was a huge moment for his investigation, you can imagine.
And just to give you an idea of how specific and, frankly, unusual this was, the original Bitcoin client, it was compiled using GCC. That's the GNU-C compiler. Now, GCC is typically a Linux thing, right? But this was done through a Windows abstraction layer, something like Wing and U. It's a bit like trying to, build a complex piece of furniture using specialized imported tools when you have perfectly good standard tools sitting right there. It's an atypical choice for compiling on Windows back then, and that specific uncommon choice, it makes for a much stronger, more unique digital fingerprint. It really stands out.
Okay, so he has this incredibly rare, unique fingerprint. Nima then cast this really wide net. He searched through something like 150,000 other compiled files in VirusTotal, all from around the same time period, looking for this exact, unusual compilation signature. And what he found next was, well, pretty astonishing. He found just one match, one single program out of all those thousands. And the big reveal, the matching program was Hashcash. Now, Hashcash was this really groundbreaking idea for proof of work. You might know that concept is fundamental to Bitcoin. It's where you do a bit of computational work to prove you're legitimate, not spamming or cheating. Hashcash was originally designed, actually, to fight email spam by making it costly to send loads of junk mail.
And if you connect this to the bigger picture, Hashcash is huge for Bitcoin. It's explicitly cited right there in the Bitcoin white paper. Satoshi says Hashcash was the inspiration for Bitcoin's own proof-of-work system. So the fact that Hashcash, the very foundation of Bitcoin's security model, was apparently compiled in the exact same unusual way as the first Bitcoin client, well, that digital link is incredibly compelling, isn't it? It strongly suggests a shared, unique digital workspace or tool set.
And the person who created Hashcash, the person who compiled that specific program Nima found, that would be Adam Back.
Right. So if you boil it down, the core of Nima's theory is this. The same highly unusual compilation environment was used for both Bitcoin and Hashcash, and that strongly suggests a direct, maybe personal, connection to Adam Back. It's a powerful link traced through the code itself.
And Adam Back's reaction, his public reaction to Nima putting this theory out there. Well, from what we can gather, he didn't seem thrilled about it, let's put it that way. But okay, a claim this big, especially when you're talking about identifying Satoshi, it's always going to face serious pushback, right? And this is where the debate really heats up. What are the main challenges to Nima's theory? What are the counterarguments?
Oh, one of the biggest ones revolves around emails. There was this legal case involving Craig Wright, another person claiming to be Satoshi. And during that case, Adam Back stated he'd exchanged emails with Satoshi Nakamoto both before and after the Bitcoin white paper came out. He presented these emails basically saying, look, I was emailing with Satoshi, so how could I be Satoshi? It seems logical on the surface.
Yeah, and that seems to connect to something Adam Back said earlier, too. Back in 2019, he tweeted something publicly. He said Satoshi's anonymity is a core part of Bitcoin. And if he, Adam Back, ever had any records that could compromise that anonymity, he'd destroy them. So it makes you wonder, right? If he'd destroy records, why keep these specific emails and then present them in court? It seems a bit contradictory.
Nima Bagheri definitely pushes back on this. He argues those emails might actually be fabricated. He points to that 2019 tweet as evidence against Back holding on to such records. But he also points to inconsistencies inside the emails themselves. Like, in one email, the person writing as Satoshi seems unaware of a system called Bony. Now, Bony was actually cited in Adam Back's original Hashcash paper. So if Adam Back wrote the Hashcash paper, he'd absolutely know about Bony. It's directly related, Satoshi seeming ignorant of it. That casts some serious doubt on whether those emails are genuine.
And it really just highlights how incredibly difficult it is to verify old emails like that, especially plain text ones from, 20 years ago? Without strong cryptographic proof, Nima's claim they're fabricated is really hard to definitively prove, but it's also hard to disprove. It leaves us kind of stuck in the middle.
Nima also found something else pretty interesting, another piece of his puzzle. He apparently found even earlier files related to Bitcoin, compiled years before the public release in 2009, we're talking 2006. And these earlier files, they shared the exact same unusual compilation characteristics. So this suggests that whoever Satoshi was, maybe they'd been working on Bitcoin for quite a while, longer than most people assume, and using that same specific digital setup the whole time.
Which brings us to what Nima calls the unusual update schedule. He argues that for someone like Adam Back, a known security expert, sticking with the exact same version of compilation software for maybe 2-3 years without updating, that's not just unusual, it's kind of weird, right? Security folks usually keep their tools updated. So what does this frozen environment really mean?
Well, okay, there are other possible explanations for why the compilation signatures might match. You have to consider those. Maybe Adam Back and Satoshi, whoever Satoshi really was, maybe a group. Maybe they use the same shared computers. Like, think about a university computer lab or maybe some academic research facility. Software there often gets frozen, installed, and not updated frequently by individual users. That could explain it. Or perhaps they worked in the same company, same corporate environment, where the IT department mandates specific software configurations. That could also lead to the same fingerprint on different projects.
Or, and this is a bit more out there, you could have master deceiver idea. Is it possible Satoshi intentionally copied the Hashcash compilation signature and cited Adam Back in the white paper specifically to create a diversion, like deliberately throwing suspicion onto Back to protect their real identity even more effectively? It's a bit cloak and dagger, but you can't rule it out entirely, I suppose.
Yeah, and it's also worth noting, the wider security community hasn't exactly jumped on board with Nima's theory en masse. A lot of experts seem to think it's, well, too circumstantial, maybe a bit too much of a leap. They might argue there could be loads of other programs compiled the same way that Nima just hasn't found, or that his method, while clever, isn't quite definitive enough for such a huge claim. Needs more, maybe peer review, more validation.
And then there's this other nagging point. Some people bring up the mediocre coder issue. Experts have actually analyzed Satoshi's original Bitcoin code. They often describe it as, well, average, or maybe good enough.
Yeah.
Functional, but not brilliant. It doesn't scream super programmer or world-class cryptographer, which are descriptions often associated with Adam Back. So there's a potential mismatch in perceived skill or coding style.
But maybe the biggest hurdle, the thing that's hardest to reconcile for many people, is what you could call the philosophical chasm. It's a big one. Adam Back's public positions and the direction of his company, Blockstream, They focus heavily on small blocks for Bitcoin and scaling mainly through layer 2 solutions, like the Lightning Network, moving transactions off the main blockchain. But that seems, well, diametrically opposed, really, to what Satoshi initially wrote about wanting for Bitcoin. Satoshi seemed to envision larger blocks and scaling happening primarily on the main blockchain itself. So it raises this fundamental question. Why would the creator of Bitcoin actively champion a direction that seems to contradict their own original vision?
Exactly. It's not just a small difference of opinion, is it? It feels like a really fundamental disagreement on how Bitcoin should work, how it should scale for the future. And that's a very difficult circle to square if you think back is Satoshi. So where does that leave us? We've looked at this intriguing technical evidence from Nima Bagheri, the compilation signature match. It's definitely fascinating stuff. But then you weigh it against these pretty significant counter-arguments, the email controversy, the lack of broad expert consensus, and especially this deep philosophical divide. It creates quite a bit of doubt, doesn't it? I'd say we're not fully convinced here, but wow, it adds a really technically dense and captivating new chapter to the whole Satoshi mystery.
And just to leave you with something really wild to think about, a totally provocative idea, what if, just what if? Adam Back was Satoshi, but then he deliberately flipped sides, publicly argued against his original vision, became CEO of Blockstream, all as some kind of incredibly complex, long-game strategy, like a calculated sacrifice of his own public stance to mislead potential attackers, maybe governments, maybe powerful institutions, ensuring Bitcoin's real decentralized nature could survive and thrive elsewhere, perhaps under different leadership or direction. Look, it's a super far-out idea, pure speculation, but if Beck was Satoshi, and if this huge shift was some kind of strategic masterstroke, well, that implies a level of planning and deception that's almost hard to even comprehend.
Yeah, mind-bending stuff to consider. So whether Satoshi turns out to be Adam Back or someone completely different, and maybe even someone who was publicly involved early on, but just not under that name, the mystery definitely continues. What really stands out to you after hearing all this, we genuinely encourage you, if you're interested, to look up Nima Bagheri's original research, read the counter-arguments, and form your own view. Remember the crypto mantra: don't trust, verify. And that concludes this deep dive.